Both the Raiders and the Bears enter Sunday's game with the same record, 1-2 overall. But how similar are these two teams, or are they? You'll find out that plus more on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, September 25th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition to the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you. If you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast or checking us out by way of the YouTube page, you know we appreciate both. The show continues to grow each and every day because of your consistent support and the great job that my man Ari does behind the scenes each and every day, making sure we look good and sound good each and every day. So we shout him out. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well on Twitter at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line for you, 707-654-4693. No calls or texts on today's show. Today is Thursday, so each and every week on Thursdays, we have crossover Thursdays. What does that mean? Well, the next team up on the schedule for the Raiders, the host of that show, will join this show, and we'll talk about storylines. We'll talk about matchups. We'll talk about keys to victory. So Chicago Bears are up next, week 4 action at Allegiant Stadium. Lorin Cox does a fantastic job, host of Locked On Bears, joins the shows, and again, storylines, matchups, and the key to victory on today's show. So he does a fantastic job. It's always great to compare and contrast and join the show with him. We'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of this show, which is Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Segment number 1, we give the biggest storylines. Lorin Cox and me talk about the storylines for the 1-2 Bears and the 1-2 Raiders. Exact same records, but two teams that feel a lot different. Let's go ahead and jump into part number 1.
We start over in Raiderland, where I think both these teams are trying to figure out some different things and get their running games going and stop some of the bleeding on defense. What are you looking at the biggest storyline entering this week?
Well, I'm trying to see who the Raiders really are, right? It's funny that both teams come into this game with the same record, but the Bears are coming off a big victory over the Cowboys where it looked like their offense was ascending, where you look at the Raiders, they've lost 2 straight now, and it feels like maybe they are, sliding backwards a little bit after winning their first game of the season against the Patriots. So they can have the same record, but it just doesn't have the same feel right now. And, the Raiders really hit the struggle bus on Sunday against the Commanders. And granted, they were coming off a short week against the Chargers. They played on Monday Night Football, and the Commanders basically had 10 days off before they played. But the expectations were for them to make that trip to D.C. and play a lot better, and they haven't done that. And the offensive line has been the story of conversation since that game, just because Geno Smith got sacked 5 times, and Ashton Jeanty, as a guy that was picked number 6 overall, really hasn't got the run game going to the level of what his expectations or Raider Nation's expectations have been. So I think a lot of folks in the biggest storyline will be, can this offensive line start to come together? Can it start to gel? Can they give Geno Smith some time? Can they open up some rush lanes for Ashton Jeanty? Lorin, this guy has 145 rushing yards after contact and has a total of 144 rushing yards on the season. Right? I mean, it's comical. I'm not a comedian, but that's real. It's comical that's where the Raiders are right now with their offensive line and what they've been able to do. And so they need to remedy that. So the biggest storyline is, can this offensive line start to come together? It's only going to be the second time, if Jackson Powers-Johnson is actually in the starting lineup, that it's been the same, starting 5, the starting offensive line that was in week 1.
Well, there's going to be so many Bears fans listening to this going, why are you ruining Ashton Jeanty? We wanted him so badly. What if you would have just let us take him, then he would be having such a better season. And yet, the Bears haven't been able to run the ball very effectively as well. And both teams are going to be trying to get that ground game going a little bit more. But I'm curious, do you think the Raiders and maybe Raiders Nation more broadly sees the Bears as a team where, like, oh yeah, we should be able to get the running game going a little bit? Like, does this look to you guys like the kind of game that you can get right and bounce back a little bit? Or is there some legitimate, I don't know if fear is too strong word, but like confidence in, they actually did look really good against Dallas and that feels real? Or does it feel like, they beat up on a bad Dallas team?
Well, I mean, yeah, beat up on a bad Dallas team for sure, at least bad Dallas defense. Now I'll say this. I think that a lot of Raider fans feel like this is going to be a tough game because of the way that the offense for Chicago performed. I'm not talking about the running game, because as you mentioned, they haven't got to get that going yet either. But I do think that a lot of Raider Nation, I know I do as well, believe that the Raiders could start to get some sense of a run game going, only because I know that the Bears haven't necessarily stopped the run really well, right? So I think that there's that, but all roads lead back to the offensive line, Lorin. You know how it is, man. If you don't have it in the trenches, you're just not going to be able to get a running game going, and you're not going to be able to protect your quarterback. So the offensive line has to start to come together. But if they do have an opportunity to do that, I would think that it could be this week against Chicago, only because I know the rush defense is not where it needs to be, where the Bears would like it to be. So I guess it's a concern about the offense and Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson coming together and starting to figure things out. And Roma Dunze, the Las Vegas guy, having a big time performance and being a nice go-to for Caleb Williams. Obviously, we know about DJ Moore as well. His name speaks for itself, but there's weapons offensively, as you know. And so that's a concern for Raider Nation. But, seeing Ashton Jeanty get going, I think is a real hope for Raider Nation, knowing that the Bears struggle to stop the run so far.
Well, you mentioned the importance of the offensive line there and the pass rush being a big factor. And that's something that I think a lot of Chicago fans are worried about entering this game. That part of what worked so well for them last week against Dallas was, the Cowboys don't have Micah Parsons, they don't have much of a pass rush at all. And they kept Caleb Williams very clean. It was the first game of his young career where he wasn't sacked at all. And that's a big part of why they were able to slice and dice the Cowboys defense. And with Mad Max Crosby lining up on that other side, the Bears are particularly worried about their left tackle, Braxton Jones, who's been a little bit of a weak link, but just had a great game against Dallas. But was it a bad Dallas team, or has he actually taken some strides there? And I know, Darnell Wright was banged up a little bit in that last game, but sounds like it's not going to be too big of an impact this week. But I think there's a fear and a feeling like maybe some of the false positive from the Cowboys game was a result of how much better the offensive line could play, and that maybe the Raiders will present a significantly greater challenge there than what the Bears faced last week.
Well, I'll tell you, the Raiders' defense is based off getting pressure to the quarterback, right? Their goal is to get pressure with the front four. Their goal is not to have to blitz. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to, because it seems like they have to blitz, at least that it has so far through the first 3 games of the season, to be able to really generate that pressure. Max Crosby gets all the attention. I'm sure he's going to get a lot of the attention on Sunday against the Bears. I know Ben Johnson opened up his press conference talking about Max Crosby and what kind of effect he has on the game and how he wrecks games. So there's no doubt about it. They're going to throw a lot of attention his way. That means that a guy like Tyree Wilson, a guy like Adam Butler, a guy like Malcolm Kuntz, they're going to have to do their job as well. Step up. Maybe even Jamal Adams could have a big game from the linebacker position as well, trying to get some pressure on the quarterback and stop the run game of Chicago. So it's going to be, if the Raiders are able to have a really good defensive showing, it's because the pressure was there. The defensive line was able to do what they do. So we'll see how it plays out, but that's definitely the goal of the Raiders, and Mad Max Crosby always is trying to wreck games, as you know.
Yeah, and it's just funny because I think we talk about these two teams looking to do a lot of the same things here, where like they both haven't run the ball nearly as effectively as they'd like to, and certainly from a Bears perspective, the Bears have not been able to rush the passer nearly as effectively as they'd like to. And so with the Raiders offensive line struggling, that's an area where they're looking for Montez Sweat to get going a little bit more than he has so far this season, and Gervon Dexter to get going even a little bit more than he has. And Grady Jarrett's been a huge disappointment through the first 3 games. And they're looking at, some chum in the water with this Raiders offensive line as something that where this pass rush can maybe get going and be more disruptive. But I think both teams are kind of looking at their opponent saying, hey, this is a matchup where we can right some of our wrongs. And I don't know, maybe they both figure out ways to do it at the same time. And then does it become a shootout at that point, or do the pass rushes disrupt the offenses enough that we get a lower scoring slugfest?
It feels like it could be that Spider-Man meme, right? Everyone looks the same. You're pointing at it. Hey, it's you. No, it's me. It's you. I mean, it very well could be that. And I know that's something that Ben Johnson alluded to, right? The teams are very similar. They have a lot of areas that they're trying to grow. I think that Geno Smith in the passing game is there. I know Brock Bowers is a little banged up. He hasn't been as healthy as he would like to be since week 1 of the season, but full participant in practice on Wednesday, so I know he'll be out there. Jacoby Myers is there. Michael Mayer probably won't be there if I had to guess. I mean, he didn't participate on Wednesday dealing with that concussion, but, they got speed in Dante Thornton Jr., they got speed in Trey Tucker, who just came off a 3-touchdown performance against the Commanders. So, I mean, he's starting to come into his own, and again, if they can get the running game going, it could become something. But I do, Lorin, feel like that the big storylines for this game are very similar for both teams.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned health there, because that's the other big thing for the Bears. The thing that's not similar between these two teams is how banged up Chicago is. I know Las Vegas has injuries, but the Bears right now might not have. They're not going to have Jalen Johnson. They might not have Kyler Gordon. They might not have T.J. Edwards. They got DeAndre Swift is banged up now. Grady Jarrett was banged up a little bit. They're missing multiple starters, and that's really going to shape some of the key matchups in this game. You mentioned Trey Tucker. He's one I want to talk about as we continue our crossover Thursday Locked On Raiders, Locked On Bears podcast.
So there was the biggest storylines right there. Lorin Cox, Locked On Bears, and myself. And, look, the Bears coming off a victory over the Dallas Cowboys. The Raiders coming off 2 straight losses, right? So it does feel like 2 teams, even though they have the same record, they feel a lot different. So what are going to be the biggest matchups? Where do we need to pay attention to when it comes to the Bears and what kind of weapons they're bringing to Allegiant? And what do the Bears have to pay attention to that the Raiders could exploit them or how they could exploit them? We'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors here on the show, including FanDuel. With the NFL season being here, FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And folks love using FanDuel. They make it fit however you like to bet. Player props, building the same game parlay, or jumping in live as the action unfolds. And look, when this game was first, announced, the Raiders were favorites in this one. Now the Bears, I believe, have, are the favorites in this game. So maybe you're going to do some live action. You want to see how the first quarter looks before you want to jump in on it. You can do that. It basically makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little bit more energy to Sundays, to Thursdays, to Saturdays, to Mondays, whatever the case may be. FanDuel will make you do it. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. I also want to tell you about Wayfair. When you think game day, you might not think Wayfair, but you should, because Wayfair is the best kept secret for incredible and affordable game day finds. Wayfair has everything you need to get your space ready for the season, whether you're tailgating outdoors or cheering from your living room. You can do anything you want. Get the grill, cooler, recliner. It completely leveled up for game day expectations and maybe even game day entertainment. You can do it. Folks love Wayfair and, the selection that they have. They have unique finds and options for every budget, so you can show off your team spirit without overspending. Delivery free, fast, and hassle-free, which is a lifesaver when you need something in time for kickoff. Wayfair is your trusted destination for all things game day, from coolers and grills to recliners and slow cookers. Shop, save, and score today at Wayfair.com. That's Wayfair.com, Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, crossover edition, Locked On Bears and Locked On Raiders. Lorin Cox, host of Locked On Bears. We did the biggest storylines in segment number 1. Now it's time for the biggest matchup. So players that Lorin is concerned about that could hurt the Bears, and obviously players that I'm looking at that I think could be a problem for the Silver and Black. Let's go ahead and cross it over here in segment number 2.
I want to go through some of the top matchups here, and you had mentioned Trey Tucker right before the break, and I want to get your breakdown on how good he's been and where this has sort of come from him, because matchup-wise, the Bears' cornerbacks have been the big weakness maybe all over the roster with Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon out. They're starting Tyreek Stevenson, who they generally like, and then Nashawn Wright is the other starting cornerback, who's a former third-round pick by the Cowboys who kind of flamed out there and was a veteran minimum free agent signing this offseason that did well at training camp, but he's gotten scorched a lot early in this season. And they got a backup slot cornerback. Nick McLeod's another journeyman. So it's that's the big weakness. And when I see Trey Tucker having this huge game against the Commanders, I'm sitting here worried that, another big performance is in store.
Well, it's funny, Lorin. I mean, it goes back to training camp with Trey Tucker. He's in year 3 right now, and we've all been waiting to see, can Trey Tucker carve out a role where he's, more than just a guy that goes deep or a guy that runs the go routes and that's it, right? He just really hasn't defined himself as a really good NFL wide receiver. And in training camp, I tell you, I came back and I was talking on the podcast about the Raiders like Trey Tucker. Chip Kelly likes Trey Tucker. They've been finding ways to get him the ball, and I think that that's a really good thing. And he's catching passes in the middle of the field where he never was doing that. And so the week 1 game against the Patriots, boom, he gets the first touchdown of the game, right? Just a Geno Smith, 26-yard pass to Tucker. And then we saw on Sunday, even though it was a big-time loss, Raiders and Commanders, the Commanders blew him out, comes away with 3 more touchdowns. So, he's got 4 touchdowns on the season. All of a sudden, this guy has become a nice weapon for Geno Smith. And it's funny, in training camp, he said, he reminds me of Santana Moss. And I was like, whoa, Santana Moss, hold up now. That's that carries some weight, man. That ain't you're not just throwing any name around there. Santana Moss was a dog. And then you see him playing and you see him going to him and him trusting him as much as he is so far this season. Okay, he really does see something in Trey that he's liking and that he's trying to bring to the table. So I think Trey is really a guy that Chip Kelly likes to call his number. He likes to get him involved. He's a speedster, but he doesn't need to be just a guy that stretches the field. Obviously, he's a smaller dude. So I would expect end of rounds. I expect them to get him involved in the running game if they can get some blocking. I think there's a lot of different ways you can use Trey Tucker, and I think Geno Smith really likes him. So he's definitely a guy, especially after this performance on Sunday, that you got to pay attention to. And if there's any weakness in the secondary, I definitely think Chip Kelly and Geno Smith are going to try to attack it.
The other guy I wanted to ask about was Brock Bowers. I mean, obviously we know how good he is, but I guess twofold on that front. One, last week against the Cowboys, Dak Prescott completed 13 passes to tight end Jake Ferguson. A lot of them, short checkdowns, not a ton of yards there, but like that was their whole offense. And then you can find some good matchups there against TJ Edwards' replacement. Noah Sewell has been definitely lackluster in coverage and not a speedy linebacker at all. So I worry about what a fully healthy Brock Bowers can do to this Bears defense. But and so I know like week one, he had some nice plays and then he's been banged up. Where do things stand now and how much have injuries affected his output and how much has been sort of finding his way in Chip Kelly's offense?
Yeah, he's been affected by the injuries, no doubt. I don't want to lie to you and say that he wasn't, and he isn't. 5 catches, 105 yards week one, and I think he's had 30 yards here, 40 yards there, and that's really it. I mean, his production, you could tell that he's hobbled. He's not the same guy. He's not able to get as much lift as he usually would. I mean, he's got a knee sprain, and he's wearing a big brace. And, in the locker room, he tells us, like, yeah, it's not what I want to do. I don't want to wear it, but I have to, so I'm going to go out there and I'm going to gut it out. So he's not at full speed. He's still good. He's still reliable. He's still a guy that Geno Smith will look to early and often, but he wouldn't be the guy. He's not the guy that he was when he's fully healthy, right? And you can see that by the production, but he's still one of Geno's favorite targets. And, I'm interested to see what the matchup will look like because, again, he won't be 100% on Sunday. But if the Bears secondary is having some problems, especially covering the tight ends, I wonder how much Geno will still try to go to him. And, again, the big issue for me is that Michael Mayer will probably miss. And, he's out with a concussion right now, so he's got to go through protocol. He's not like he can wake up and say, hey, I feel great, I'm going to go play. He got to go through a concussion protocol. So we'll see if he is able to pass that by the end of the week. I'd be surprised if he was. Again, it's just my gut feeling. But then they have Ian Thomas, and I know a lot of Raider Nation doesn't know about Ian Thomas. I don't think a lot of football fans outside of Carolina knows about Ian Thomas, but he's an 8-year vet. He can catch the ball, and he can block as well. So if Michael Mayer can't go, I'd expect to see number 80 out there. That is Ian Thomas, and I think that he can end up playing a big role. The Raiders want to run 12 personnel. There's been a lot of 12 personnel played in the NFL this year. They want to be part of that group, and so to do that, they're going to need 2 healthy tight ends out there. So Brock is going to go. He's a full participant in practice. He'll go. But is Michael Mayer going to be there, or is it going to be the Ian Thomas show? So that's going to be something to be interested to pay attention to. But like you said, the Cowboys had so much success, throwing to the tight ends that Chip Kelly would be foolish not to try to test those waters.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the tight ends and 12 personnel because that's something obviously the Bears do a lot of. But last week against Dallas, Colston Loveland leaves about halfway through the game with a hip injury, their first round pick. And so they haven't been able to fully unleash him just yet the way they would like to. And he was a DNP at practice on Wednesday. And so they've been very vague about the severity of that. They're kind of like, well, we don't know. We got to kind of see how it goes. So we don't. Really, at this point, it's hard to say whether he'd be able to play this weekend or not. But whether even if he does, that's something the Bears are looking to get him a little bit more involved because last week they finally got Luther Burden rolling in the offense, their second round pick out of Missouri, and he hit on some deep shots. And I look at this Raiders secondary and specifically the cornerback room, and I don't see a lot of names that the average football fan will have heard of. Maybe Bears fans will remember Eric Stokes from Green Bay, but kind of flamed out in Green Bay and wasn't exactly what they wanted him to be in Green Bay. And then, a guy like Kai Blue Kelly and Darnay Holmes and some other young guys on the bench with them. I guess what's the level of concern about the matchups with guys like Luther Burden and Rome Odunze, who've had, a couple of big plays last week against the Cowboys that seemed to really open things up?
Big time concern. There's no doubt, man. Big time concern. Eric Stokes has actually done a pretty good job holding his own so far. He's on a 1-year deal and former first round pick in Green Bay, but like you said, really flamed out due to injury, but he's done pretty well. But, Kai Blue Kelly, he's a guy that was replaced at the end of the game on Sunday against the Commanders. Darian Porter, the 3rd-round pick out of Iowa State, came in at the end, and he's long, and he fits the Pete Carroll description of defensive backs, and so he's trying to work his way into the lineup. But, there's questions in the secondary. That's something that we talked about all training camp, all offseason. Is this secondary going to be able to hold up? Even the safeties in the back end, Jeremy Chin and Isaiah Polamau, I mean, they're not necessarily household names. Jeremy Chin, I think a lot of people have heard of, but Isaiah Polamau, undrafted free agent. He's hung around the Raiders and got a 3-year contract extension. He makes some good plays, but he's not someone that, as you mentioned, your average football fan is going to know these names. So they're young guys. They're not necessarily guys that have big names. They're trying to find their footing and their way in the NFL. And you got Roma Dunze and you got Luther Burden, right? Those are dudes, right? And so it's going to be some tough sledding. There's no doubt. And again, all roads go back to the pressure up front. Can the Raiders get pressure on Caleb Williams? Can they make him roll out? Can they make him play some backyard football, which at times is probably when he's best, playing the backyard football. It's what he, knows. But can he, they force him into a mistake because he will put the ball in harm's way. You got to go make the play. The question is, can the Raiders make the play? But, man, slowing down Odunze and Burden, man, that's going to be tough. And that's what I think a lot of Raider fans are thinking about, seeing that offensive performance that the Bears put on the Cowboys last week. That's a big concern coming to Las Vegas.
Yeah, that dynamic between like Caleb making plays out of the pocket and doing some hero ball versus playing in the structure, I think is going to be a really key component of this game. And we're going to go through some of the different keys to victory for both sides as we continue our crossover Thursday Locked On Raiders, Locked On Bears podcast.
There's the biggest matchups right now. Some players that, Lorin has his eyes on for the Raiders that could hurt the Bears. And obviously the Bears have some playmakers, including their quarterback and their head coach. That's a really good play caller that could hurt the silver and black. So coming up in segment number 3, we're going to talk about the path to victory. What is it going to take? And may even let you know how we feel the game is going to shake out and why it's going to shake out the way that it does. We'll do that coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor here on the show, and that's Game Time. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets could be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it gets frustrating. That's why folks use Game Time. That's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is actually the price you pay. Pull up the Game Time app. In just a couple taps, you can see all the amazing deals. I mean, all your favorite NFL games as low as $100. You may be even able to find Raiders Bears Allegiant Stadium this Sunday. The app makes it super simple. You can see the exact view from your seat before you buy. They got zone deals. What are zone deals? You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that you'll buy tickets. Right now, download the Game Time app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. We've given you the biggest storylines. We've given you the biggest matchups. It is time for Path to Victory. Again, I want you to know that Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right back into it. Lorin Cox and myself crossing it over. Segment number 3, Path to Victory. Who's going to win the game and why? Right now, check it out.
We started talking about at the end there that the whole marriage of Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams has been about, Caleb Williams is very good outside of structure, but too often in his rookie season, that was the whole offense. Like the plays would break down. He'd have to just try and create something over and over again. And he could do it a few times very, very well. And then when you make that your whole offense, it's just not something that's sustainable. And so it's been finding this marriage of Ben Johnson gives him all the answers to the test, 3-step drop, hitch, throw, or 5-step drop, hitch, like matching up the footwork to the timing so that everything is that Jared Goff style of Lions offense. And then if it's not there, or if the offensive line breaks down, then you take the leash off. And on that play, then you break the rules, you let them loose and make those special plays. And you kind of hope that over the course of the game, it's, 80%, 90% within structure on time, and that he can make those 10 to 20% of the rest of the plays to be special and put your team over the top. And so the Raiders' ability to disrupt that initial timing with the pass rush, with the blitz, maybe with disguised coverages on the back end, like that's going to be what's key to the Bears, winning and keeping the offensive success going, or the Raiders' ability to slow down all the progress Chicago feels like it's made.
The funny thing about this is, based off of what Caleb Williams does really good, where, he's rolling out and he makes some plays and he's got a hell of an arm. We obviously know that. I think that the best approach for the Raiders defensively is to try to, cage him in, right? Keep him in the pocket and make him step up and hope that the defensive tackles are able to step up and make a play, really collapse the pocket on him as opposed to letting him roll out. Now, a lot of times when you make a quarterback roll out and they've got to throw the ball on the run, they turn it into a mistake, right? It all of a sudden it's like, oh no, you don't want to do that, throw the ball across their body or whatever and across the field. And a lot of times interceptions happen, but a lot of times Caleb starts thriving is from what I've seen, in that kind of a moment. So for the Raiders, they may want to try to fence him in as much as possible, just collapse that pocket and then really give him nowhere to go, maybe backpedal. And when he's backpedaling, that's a different ball game. So, you mentioned the footwork, and I know that that's been a big issue. Disrupt that timing. With Ben Johnson, that offense is really based off of, timing and steps and having everything on par with each other. That's what you got to do is really create that uncertainty with Caleb Williams in the pocket. That's how I think that they have the most success with him trying to defend it and slow him down.
Where do you see that with Geno in terms of like 3 interceptions against the Chargers and seem to be a little bit, I don't know if more reckless is the term there, versus like taking care of the ball a lot better against Washington, but obviously, still not enough to win that game either. Like what has been the difference between when that Raiders offense is thriving and when it's struggling? And I guess, how do you apply that to then what we're going to see on Sunday?
Yeah, I guess the Chargers, man, he was jacked up. He was fired up about the Monday night game. It was the season home opener. The crowd was there. It was, 90% Raider Nation was there, where this game will not be that. It'll probably be 50-50 Bears and Raider fans. But he was just so amped up and he was trying to force everything. And he told us afterwards, like, hey, man, I can't do that. I believe in my arm. I have confidence. I want to get aggressive. And the Chargers didn't allow him to beat them deep. And so they said, okay, you're going to have to dink and dunk. You're going to have to settle for, plays underneath, and then we're going to rally and come up and tackle. And he wanted to take what he wanted, right, as opposed to what the defense gave him. And so he put the ball in harm's way, and it resulted in 3 interceptions. And so he said he can't do that. He was way more efficient with that on Sunday against the Commanders, even though a lot of the stats came late and the Commanders blew out the Raiders. The thing about it is, if he doesn't have any time to set his feet and try to let a play develop, he's got to run it for his life, and that's what he's been doing. He's done a good job of it, of escaping pressure, but he still got sacked 5 times on Sunday. So again, it goes back to the offensive line, because what you'll notice from Geno is when he gets that pressure immediately, he's not keeping his eyes down the field. He's looking around the pocket, who's coming at him, and how do I escape? Right. And so that's the biggest issue. So then he's just, trying to make something happen. And to his credit, he was able to roll out, escape a few other sacks, and then get the ball to guys like Jack Besh and Dante Thornton and, Jacoby Myers and get the ball to him. But it's so off schedule and it's so just kind of out of rhythm that it doesn't really go for what it should be. So, I mean, again, it's going to be this Raiders offensive line. If Jackson Powers-Johnson is in the lineup like I think he's going to be, then it's got to start to gel and start to come together. They've got to give Geno some time, and they also have got to get Ashton Jeanty going and more than he's been going so far. He didn't do bad last week, had 63 yards, but obviously that's not the production he's looking for.
Yeah, and I think from a Chicago Bears perspective, like the strategy might just have to be like get enough of a lead that the Raiders can't run the ball with Jeanty, because I do think Las Vegas will get that going a little bit. Like he'll be able to get his 4 or 5 yards a carry here, and you'll feel like, oh, they're making some real progress in the ground game, and you'll maybe be wondering, well, they really should stick with this even more, and it'll depend on like if the Raiders can start fast and either maintain a lead or keep it a 1-score game and feel like they can slow things down and run the ball. Yep. I think that's a really clear formula for them to succeed this game and keep the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands and kind of take their time driving the ball downfield. But if the Bears come out hot like they did last week against the Cowboys and score on their first 2 drives and then put that pressure on Geno and have to do a little bit more, yep, I think that's when you can kind of see this game flip either direction. So I guess with that as the preamble, where do you see this one going? What's your confidence level in the Raiders getting back into a win column? And how do you see it shaking out?
This was a tough one, Lorin, because I feel like the Raiders have to win it, right? And technically there's no must-win game in week 4, but you don't want to be 1-3 because then you're starting to hear here we go again, same old Raiders, right? And then there may be some doubt creeping into the mind of some of the players in the locker room that have been there, done that. Like, hey, everything sounded good this offseason. Pete Carroll's this, Pete Carroll's that. And yet here we are with the same record as we've had before, 1-3. If they win this game and go 2-2, one, that bad taste of that game against Washington will be out of their mouth. They'll say, hey, we're 2-2 after 4 games. We're right in the thick of things. The Chargers are doing really good in the division, but everyone else is right where we are anyway at 1-2. So I feel like the pressure is going to be on the Raiders to win this game more than the pressure is going to be on the Bears to win this game. They have to run the ball. They have to, right? You'll know how this game goes, Lorin, based off when Genty's getting the majority of his carries. If he's getting it all in the first quarter or even the first half, and then you don't see him carrying the rock that often in the second half, then the Bears are, like you said, up early, and they're not allowing them to get into their game plan. They want to do exactly what you said. You hit it right on the head. They want to be running the ball 8, 9, 10 times in the fourth quarter, right, in the second half, trying to salt the game away and playing that kind of a game, take the air out of the stadium. That's what they want. Now, they did that week 1 against the Patriots. They obviously didn't do it week 2 or week 3. So that's how they want to play their game. If the Bears allow them to do it and hang around and keep it close, they will. But like you said, if the Bears get out early, then it's going to be a long day at the office for the Raiders. They cannot play one-dimensional football. It's just not going to work like it did week 1 against the Patriots. I think the Bears have an actual better roster as far as offensive talent than the Patriots do. So I think that the Raiders have to be able to run the ball. They have to get pressure on Caleb Williams and probably create a couple turnovers to win this game. Because they have to win this game, in my opinion, to go 2-2, I'm going to rock with them and say they're going to get it done. But I'll tell you what, man, this is not an easy timeout at all, because it seems like the Bears are ascending and the Raiders losing 2 straight, maybe on the decline, and that's not good for the Raiders at all.
I think my prediction for this game is something that it's going to be hard to definitively give right now, because I think the Bears winning and losing to me is going to depend super heavily on how this injury report plays out the rest of the week. Because again, Wednesday, TJ Edwards did not practice. Kyler Gordon did not practice. Grady Jarrett did not practice. Colston Loveland did not practice. Darnell Wright did not practice. If you're missing all 5 of those starting caliber players, I'm not sure that you can beat the Raiders. But if you get Kyler Gordon teased on Instagram that he might be coming back this week, so like if Darnell Wright's good to go and you get Gordon back, you can get by with a couple of these guys being absent. But if all 5 of those guys are done, that's going to be tough. So I think that's kind of where I'm split. Like if I have to give an official prediction, I think a healthy Bears team or a healthier Bears team wins this game. I think a more injured Bears team maybe falls a little bit short. So I don't know which one.
That's fair. No, it's fair.
Plus you got a couple other guys limited and banged up. So like I'll say, if the Bears are healthier, I think they can win. I think they'll win this game. I think there's a winnable game. If they're banged up, it might be too much to overcome. So I don't know if that's an official prediction, but nonetheless, we'll leave it there with our crossover Thursday. Thanks to Q from Locked On Raiders and all the Raiders listeners joining us for our crossover Thursday. All the Bears listeners, thanks for making Locked On Bears or Locked On Raiders your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you want a second listen today, go check out the other team's podcast to learn more about your opponent this week. You can always check out Locked On NFL for more football talk. Just make sure you come on back to Locked On Raiders and Locked On Bears tomorrow to keep it rolling and being a part of our conversation, and tune in every single day.
So there it is. There was Lorin Cox, one of the best in the business. Definitely appreciate him and his efforts. Locked On Bears. Definitely check him out each and every day if you want to find out a little bit more about the Chicago Bears before they come to Allegiant Stadium on Sunday. Again, one of the dudes that's been around the podcast network for a very long time. I had to do an emergency crossover edition with him when Khalil Mack got traded back in the day. Yeah, I know. I don't like to bring up that and pull off that Band-Aid off that wound, but I still remember the day that he hit me. It was like, hey, man, I need to get you on the show. And I was like, Yep. Yes, you do. Still remember that Saturday. You ain't supposed to be doing no show on Saturday, but still remember that Saturday. So hopefully you enjoyed that show. And, of course, we'll be back tomorrow, closing out the week really strong. We'll give you the keys to victory, news and notes, including the injury report. Hopefully some sound from the locker rooms. We'll be back at practice today. Patrick Graham, Chip Kelly, will be able to talk to those guys. And, like I said, get an opportunity to get inside the locker room. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.